I record on this. Hi, everyone. Welcome today to Church of Peace's Psychical Research Science Society July meeting. Today, we are honored and so excited to have medium and metaphysical teacher Geof Jowett. Geof Jowett's talk today is entitled Where the Intellectual Meets the Intuitive, a Mystical Journey. Geof Jowett has a great story to tell, and during his talk today, he will share his story, but I do want to put a little plug out there, and I'll do it again at the end of his talk. He's the author of 4 books and multiple CDs on meditation, and he does offer classes at his website, geofjowett.com. How I got introduced to Geof, I found his book at Barnes & Noble, Barnes & Noble, Lasting Impressions, and I read it. And I just was floored by it because I resonated with it a lot, being an academic, being a scientist. And I was so excited to have a book that I felt was very much about what we were studying in spiritualism. His book, The Power of I Am, he just did an amazing talk with us the other day that we posted on our YouTube for the center. But again, I carry this book along with me. It's a great meditation tool. He also has 2 other books, Hope for Parents Who Have Lost Children and What's Cooking in Heaven, Grandma. Some awesome, great books. You can find it on his website, geofjowett.com, also on Amazon. Now, with further ado, let's see. Let us do the speaker. And can we do a spotlight on that, Siobhan? Okay. All right, Geof, we are ready. Definitely.
Thank you so much, and thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited to share my story of the science and the mediumship aspect. I was fortunate. I grew up in Western New York, which is the home of Lilydale, which is the International Center for Spiritualism. So as a child, I saw spirit, I saw auras, and my parents were open-minded enough to put me in touch with people at Lilydale. But that really started my journey. I was a weird kid. I had a little pet cemetery. I did my own little science project. I would bury birds and fish and animals I'd find and dig them up. And I was amazed at, like, where did they go? Like, they started disappearing. And that put me on this journey of understanding where do things go when they die. I decided to study biology in college. And one of the most memorable times I had was my senior year. In my senior year, we were asked to prepare a cadaver for the next semester. And they wheeled in this body and we started taking it apart. And it was just so surreal because here I saw all the things that should, sustain life, all the organs, the organ systems and so forth, but there was something missing. And it really put me on a journey. And it took me back to 4th grade when I remember the first time I saw a dead body, and that was my great-grandfather's funeral. And I remember going up to the casket and I said to my mom, like, where'd he go? And she says, well, he's right there, he's sleeping. I said, no, he's not there. Like, where did he go? And I didn't, understand that. In those grade school years, I had some interesting experiences with nuns. I was raised Catholic. And when I went to catechism, I was constantly bringing the science lessons that we were learning in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade into catechism class. And one particular was, we were learning about dinosaurs, and I was so excited. I had a little shoebox and I made this dinosaur village, and I was excited to learn more about dinosaurs. And the thing is, it's on Tuesdays, those kids that were Catholic, we had to leave school at 2:00. Well, they got to stay and finish their little dinosaur stuff. So I go to catechism, and the nun teaching that day was talking about Adam and Eve. And I just raised my hand and I said, well, where do the dinosaurs fit in? And she got really angry with me. And she told me Satan put fossils on the earth to make us non-believers. And I was like, no, that can't be right. So religion and science were kind of in conflict with me at that time. I decided to, continue my studies. So I go back to the cadaver my senior year, and it reminded me of those times earlier on. But it really brought to light, like there has to be something bigger here going on, because again, taking apart this body, just there was things missing. So I decided to get a degree in cell molecular biology. So I studied at Roswell Cancer Institute, and I actually got my greatest lesson through my volunteer services with the school. So as I was studying DNA and cloning and bacteria and all these interesting things, a lot of my friends in grad school were like, "Oh, we got to go do the volunteer stuff." Well, I chose to work with terminally ill children, to visit with them every week. And I had this young girl, Elizabeth, and Elizabeth would want to play a game every week. And we played like the game of life, which how interesting that was. And during the time of playing the game of life, we're talking about life. And she said to me, she said, "I don't understand why people are so sad. They're always sad when they're around me." And I had no idea what to say. I felt more comfortable with my bacteria than dealing with this young child. And she said, "I know I'm going to be in heaven. I know I'm going to be with grandpa. We're going to be dancing and having fun." And she said, "But my parents and my little brother are so sad." So it got me thinking. The next week I came back and we played Chutes and Ladders and just different board games. But during the board games, she kept asking me this question, like, "Do you believe in the afterlife?" And I said, "Yeah, I believe there's something." And we had really amazing discussions. I only got about 4 or 5 meetings with her. And when I went, after, I think it was the 6th week, I showed up and the nurses said, "She's no longer here." And it really, really made me sad, because I remember the very last conversation we had when we sat down. She told me, she said, "You're going to help parents understand when we children leave early." And I said, "Well, I'm not sure about that." And she said, "No, you are. I know you are." So she really opened the door as me being a scientist, that maybe there's a higher purpose for me, relative to the spiritual side of things. So I was fortunate, because from graduate school, while I was writing my thesis, it takes like 6 months to write the thesis, I got a temporary job at an in vitro fertilization clinic. And it was nice because I got to be there to help, bring the news when someone was pregnant that had been trying to get pregnant, and that whole idea of the new life. And it really, again, set my mind on what is this about this life force that exists. And I ended up working in the biotech field for about 10 years, but I was a trainer, and I traveled all through the US. I got to go to Harvard and Yale and all the big schools that where there were Nobel laureates, in talking about DNA and cloning and genes, and understanding that genes have this ability to express a certain way. But the thing that really I took away from my whole experience as a molecular biologist is the idea that the complementation of how God is like our body. Okay, we have billions of cells, and every cell has the same information in it. It's just certain cells decide to be a skin cell, a muscle cell, a heart cell, but they all have part of the whole. So I started to see the idea of the wisdom that was within the body, even on the molecular level. But I also learned through epidemiology studies from these scientists I would visit. I would go to help them set up molecular biology experiments, but they would tell me about their research. And what I found fascinating is when they're looking at patterns of disease in families, and is there a breast cancer gene, in this family? Is there a pancreatic cancer gene in the family? What I learned in the process, and what molecular biology presented, is that the DNA material actually get change. The shape changes according to what we think, what we feel, what we believe. And therefore, if we have a certain belief pattern, maybe it's possible that certain genes are more likely to be expressed. And that's really where it opened up the understanding of the mind, body, soul aspect. I started reading Louise Hay's work, Carolyn Mace, and getting a better understanding that, there's something to this. It's not about just the genes. It's how are these genes being expressed in certain families? And, does it have to do with a thought form within a family? Like, oh, if grandma had breast cancer, mom had breast cancer, maybe I'm going to have breast cancer. Or is there a karmic link within a soul family that if I carry resentment, my grandma had resentment, my mom had that resentment, that somehow would encourage or stimulate the idea of a cancer maybe forming that way. So I left biotech, and I was an anatomy teacher at several colleges. Interesting, I never took an anatomy class, but I knew it from a molecular level. So I taught. One of the very first exercises I would have the kids do when they came to class is I'd say, okay, today, the very first thing I want you to do is I would have organs in jars and I'd put them out, a little drama, but I'd say, so why is this dead? And, why are you alive? Like, what's going on? And, naturally the students wanted to go to the biological factors of respiration, heart rate, brain waves, and so forth. I said, those are measurements, but what's the difference? Like, in this jar, I have a head and it has all the capabilities of being alive, but it's not. And I tried to get them to think beyond the physical. And throughout these years, I was having visitations from spirits. I actually did readings for friends. So I knew there was something beyond. But I think the more that science got me to question, the more it actually helped me understand that there was something beyond. And as miraculous as the body is, there's still some higher force, some higher vibration that's influencing how it all functions. I mean, tens of thousands of chemical reactions are happening in billions of cells at you at the same time. How in the world could that be possible? And I think science has shown the more we understand about the physiology, there's got to be something bigger going on. There's got to be a bigger, a higher power involved. And in my studies, I was drawn to teach anatomy at an art and design school. And it was really fun because anatomy is structure relating to function, and artists have that visual aspect. So whether they design clothes, cars, computer arts, animation, sequential arts, photography, they wanted to have this understanding of structure function, especially relative to the muscles and bones and joints. So I had a lot of fun teaching that for 6 or 7 years to them. It helped open up my clairvoyant aspect of things, that I started to understand color and composition. And so when I got images from spirit, it helped me read the meaning into them a lot more. That led to, I was asked by the president to become the dean of students at the university. And I was reluctant at first, but I took the position. And so 4 years, I was in charge of 3,000 students who tend to get in trouble, between like midnight and 4 a.m. And so I didn't get much sleep those 4 years. But what was so important to me, and I know why spirit led me there, is I learned a lot about emotional intelligence. I sat with students in my office and really talked to them about what life was about. And when they had struggles with their sexuality, their religion, the dynamics of a relationship, and it really prepared me much more, I think, for my mediumship work because of that experience. From there, though, I ended up leaving, and I moved to California. What brought me here 15 years ago is I was the dean of students at a school for alternative medicine. And this was really fascinating because I got to take classes and understand Chinese medicine and chiropractic and holistic approaches. And all these different healing modalities, but understanding the human body as an energy field. And I remember just before I took that job, I was in Philadelphia. I was given a talk, and I was in a bookstore. It was pouring rain. And I wanted to understand more about the energy body. And literally, this book fell on my head, Vibrational Medicine by Richard Gerber. And I bought the book. I've had it all these years, but it basically summarizes the science experiments that were going on. Even the government, the military, were looking at us as an energy field and understanding that, treating us as a chemistry system. Thank God we have pharmaceuticals, but we've become really dependent on them and not seeing the higher meaning behind disease or dysfunction that happens. And it led me to a bunch of other books, but one of the other foundational books that helped me on my journey was The Spontaneous Healing of Belief by Greg Braden. And I got the opportunity to see Greg speak in LA. And he really opened the door to understanding that there's something more powerful within us that influences our perception about life, our understanding, and how we react and respond to life. And it brought me to a quote by the Little Prince. The Little Prince says, "One sees clearly only with the heart. Anything essential is invisible to the eyes." And it really summarizes the spontaneous healing of belief, because your belief system is set in the core of your heart chakra, which is the center of your energetic universe. And when you believe things, it really influences the manifestation of them. So I started to really get interested in the science that was being presented relative to metaphysics, because I was doing many more readings now. Now I was reading like weekends while I had the job in California. And they set it up for me so that I was only there for 3.5 years, but the last half a year, I got to work 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week so that I can open up my mediumship practice. But I still was very interested in integrating science and metaphysics. Just like early on when I had that experience with religion, we're all saying the same stuff. We're using different terminology. Some of us are motivated more by fear or other things, but when you understand and take a step back, the pieces of the puzzle all fit together. So my mediumship was amazing to me when I first started putting the energy into it, because all these evidential messages were coming through, and I realized that the power of our consciousness is really something I wanted to explore. I'm going to just show you one more book. That led me to the Afterlife Experiments by Gary Schwartz at the University of Arizona, where he looked at a number of mediums and realized that when they measured their hits of how accurate they were with specific information. And I think it's great that there was quantitative data, but here's where I see the limitation in mediumship. As Angelo is presenting some of these studies that I hope they can focus more on, is the qualitative aspect of it. Because when you sit and provide a reading for someone, there's a connection that isn't measured, that is so healing, it's so inspiring, it's so encouraging. And that's something I think we should really put our energy into beyond the just the measuring the hit. Did I get it right or did I get it wrong? What I have found as a medium is that many times when spirit provided the insight, the person didn't understand it until later on. And to me, that's interesting, because it means I'm not reading their mind. I'm picking up information that they don't even know about. That leads me to where the mystic and the scientists meet. And I really want to bring that theme around the third eye chakra. So I was called to move to Palm Springs when I went full-time as a spiritualist, and I left education. And the first thing I did when I came here is I wrote my book, The Power of I Am, Aligning the Chakras of Consciousness. And I realized that there are certain archetypical patterns we tend to feel comfortable with or that cause distress with us. But The third eye is one that I'm specifically working on, so I have a greater understanding. And so each chakra has dueling archetypes. And I see the same pattern in our society. When it comes to the third eye allows you to understand and analyze reality. You know, what's real, what's not real. It's how we process information and knowledge. And we take past memory information and we apply it to make choices currently. But really the lessons, the wisdom, the understanding, the intuition, the discernment, your imagination is all processed in the third eye. So it really truly is about what's my relationship to the universe. So when I look at the third eye that way, I look at the scientist, which is the intellectual archetype. So in the third eye, the intellectual is someone who they want data, they want formula, they want structure. They want to be able to describe something in terms of which is limited with our ability through science. I mean, science is wonderful. We have the scientific method where we take a hypothesis, we test it, we get insight and so forth. But what's been so fascinating with science is they've shown that people can set an experiment up, but they color it just like we can in a reading when we bring our own stuff in. They can color it so that they get an outcome that they feel is real. And a great example is when light was studied. Light in some research labs is a particle, and in some labs it's a wave. And it depends on how you're setting up the experimentation. And I love science. I'm not here to criticize it, but it does has limitations because the scientist is still going to have some type of bias according to their life experience and understanding. But the thing when we over intellectualize things, this is where when we over analyze, we get hypercritical, we tend to get confused and skeptical and distressed. And this is where we can cause a lot of interesting things happening in our mind. And I want to throw in the whole idea behind technology here. We've become so reliant on technology that if Siri tells me to take a right and it's a dead end, you know, sometimes I listen and I got to take a step back and say, wait a minute, like my intuition's telling me this isn't right. But we get so dependent on these things that we have to be careful not to say, what do I feel? You know, what does this make me feel? And I want to make sure too, that when I go through life, that I'm not going to have a mechanical response to things. I want to be more human. So the dueling archetype with the intellectual is the intuitive. And the intuitive is that person that has the gift to know and understand that they have this feeling, this insight. It's called being in the zone. And in that zone, my spirit speaks to me. And your spirit truly is your best friend because your spirit has been through everything with you. Not only this lifetime, your spirit's been through all your lifetimes. So your spirit is your wisest teacher, your greatest healer, and your most encouraging friend because it knows your weaknesses, it knows your strengths, it knows your obstacles, it knows your opportunities. And so when you take time to really listen with your heart and understand that inner knowing, that's when you get into the magic of serendipity and synchronicity. And one of my favorite quotes from Einstein, who I find fascinating when you look at all the geniuses, whether it's Michelangelo, Aristotle, any poet, any writer, any artist, they always say their masterpiece came through them, not from them. And so Einstein says the only really valuable thing is intuition. And it's true. I mean, here you have a very methodical scientist realizing that there's something bigger than just the formula. And so, that idea of synchronicity and serendipity, and as I've gone through life, especially like the last 10 years, people constantly tell me, oh, you're so lucky, like good things happen to you. And it's like, they don't just happen, like you manifest them. And it's a state of mind, it's a state of consciousness. But one of the great reassurances is that intuitive nature because of the synchronicity that happens. There's just a rhythm when you're riding the wave of life, and not in that sense of resistance. I think the greatest opportunity we have, though, relative to understanding mediumship and all these psychic phenomena, is to explore consciousness. You know, there's even lots of discrepancy about what people call consciousness. You know, there's an awareness, an internal or an external awareness of things, but there's definitely a lot of work that can be done for us to understand our consciousness. Not abnormal, it's normal, and that's where I hope we go with the studies too. You know, there's neuroscience now, there's neuropsychology, there's neuro biology, and there's psychology, but I think we have to be careful when we look at consciousness, that we don't want to peg it into a quantitative formula. You know, the scientific method is helpful, but I think we want to look at it more from a perspective of the feeling aspect and the knowing aspect, and perhaps we're going to have to develop new methodology to explore that, and maybe use our own intuition and take some time. One thing I'm really impressed with is all the universities that are now studying this phenomena. You know, everywhere from Stanford, Princeton, Duke, University of Virginia, University of Arizona, UCLA, Cornell, they're all taking a peek at it, but there's still a lot of skepticism. I know in the academic community, they want to call it the woohoo factor, but when you look at near-death experiences, when you look at extrasensory perception, cytokinesis, I mean, there's a lot of great information, but again, I don't think we yet have a great way to quantify it. I think that's where one of the big challenges is. So with my work now, I teach workshops, I do readings. I actually James von Prague dubbed me an intuitive medium. And he says, I call you that because you like to look in terms of what's in the highest good of the soul. And that's how I like to approach my work. And some of my favorite work is to work with people to help them understand their ripe seed karma, the karma they were born with. Because I like to look as a scientist at the epidemiology of the family. Like if heart disease is in the family, there's probably issues with the actor, actress of the heart chakra that's perpetuating something, to encourage that. Or if there's addiction issues, something in the solar plexus with the servant, feeling disempowered and so forth. So that's my passion, because to truly heal ourselves, we want to understand ourselves. The good old Greeks said, know thyself. And we're all mirrors for each other, and we can help each other, in that way. But that's really what I wanted to talk about today, is just, to me, that the intuitive and the intellectual really complement each other well and work hand in hand. But we have to be careful not to limit ourselves based on historical data, and to look at things with fresh eyes and a higher perspective.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Geof. Wow. Awesome. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, Gloria.
Thank you, Geof. That was wonderful to hear your journey to
Thanks.
your arrival here. I'm interested in more of what you think. When you mentioned the exploration of consciousness, and automatically I'm brought back to William James's theory of stream of consciousness. And I really would like, if you don't mind sharing, or if you're able to share, bringing that back, you said, to the more of the feeling and the knowing aspect as intuitive people. And coming,
that's a great question. Yeah.
And methodology, and what would that look like to you? Like,
and part of my journey, why I think it was so interesting, I ended up at an art school, is because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to teach to all these artists that, first of all, they're going to be so resistant because it's a science class. But really, I'm actually going back to be a part-time high school teacher for anatomy for a prep school out here this fall, coming back full circle. But see, how I'm going to teach anatomy now is how I would do it there. And it's very visual oriented. The students would create a project. For instance, when we study tissues, muscle tissue, connective tissue, blood structure relates to function. So they'd have to go to the hardware store and create a tissue of a superhero where structure function. See, to me, it's more about the artistic aspect of things. It's the visual, the feeling aspect. And that's why I think art is so important in the realms of understanding consciousness. And to me, when I go to an art gallery or I go to a great movie, to me, that's a great representation of consciousness because it's eliciting a feeling. But I'm a good old fan of Edgar Cayce. And Edgar Cayce, one of the oldest books I have on my shelf is called Edgar Cayce on Channeling Your Higher Self. And he basically came up with 4 techniques to understand your intuition. And when I look at intuition, to me, it represents consciousness because my intuition, it's the voice of my spirit. And consciousness to me is the understanding of my spirit because that's the essence of who I am. His 4 techniques are dream analysis, meditation, inspirational speaking, and automatic writing. And automatic writing is real important for me because I still tend to be a little in my head, but it gives me a technique where I can get it, down on paper. But in each one of his techniques, what's really important is you don't just blindly go to sleep and do the dream analysis, or you don't blindly just meditate. You actually pick something to focus on. Like, help me understand how to get through my third eye karma. And you set that intention. But what's so beautiful, for example, that he talks about with dream analysis is it's like going fishing. So when you go to sleep and you get in that deep sleep, if I set the intention of understanding how can I master my intuition, I'll get impressions, I'll get little pieces, and I'll get a better understanding. But over time of dreaming on that and meditating on it, I'll put the pieces together. But it's more about what I feel. It's not like, oh, I saw a snake in the dream, or, oh, I saw a river. It's what does that make me feel like? And again, the analogy I use is when I go to the movies, it's not so important that I tell you what happened in the movies, but what to me is more important, what did it make me feel like? Like, how did it change my thought process? And so for you to have this self-exploration through these different techniques will be really important for you to navigate. And that's why it's so valuable to have time. One of my favorite workshops I teach now is befriending your higher self, like setting up date time with your higher self so that you can get to know why am I experiencing this and why do I feel this way, and to help me understand. But is that helpful?
Oh, absolutely. You're singing to the choir. After 35 years of teaching, I love teaching. I actually consciously retired so I can do this. So
yeah, that's perfect.
You're singing
now you get to be a full-time student.
Yeah, I'm always a student, but yes, absolutely. But you're singing to the choir, and I just love it. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Excellent. Does anybody else have a question? Well, I have some questions. My biggest thing is, how do we looking ahead, how do we get the science aspect with the spiritual phenomenon joined, connected? Do you have any advice on how to go ahead and do that?
Well, what I see, what I think is going to be the aha is understanding that spirituality is an aspect of every part of our life. That whether you're an artist, whether you're a mother, whether you're a gardener, whether you're a painter, like it's the essence of everything. And to try to separate it is, I think that's the part that's going to be challenging, because it truly is who we are. And science is really just the observation of life. And especially when you look at the biological aspect of things, I think the paradigm has to shift that this is something abnormal or I don't know. And people need to also understand, I think this would be really helpful. For example, physics is studying the physical aspects of things. Metaphysics is studying the non-physical aspect of things. And they're both important, but again, the essence of us as we're understanding as energy and vibrations and so forth, is that we should be teaching kids at an earlier age to understand this stuff and stop waiting until they go through college and then they start exploring it.
Yes.
I find it fascinating. I've been asked to go speak at some death and dying classes. And, many of these students still have no idea of what a soul is or what a spirit is, so it's so foreign to them. And I think, wow, like, how can that still be? But one of the things I'm excited about this job that I accepted is they're letting me teach 2 electives, and one is wellness and well-being. And I'm going to teach about emotional intelligence. I'm going to teach about stress management. I'm going to teach about, your physical aspect of things, but then your spiritual. We're going to meditate. And we're going to do things like that. And the school thought this is great because they haven't been exposed to that. And I think the earlier we can get that in, it's going to help change things. It's going to be hard to change the people who are already in and they have that strong dogma. But I think it's going to be really important to really not even separate it, because it's part of every part of our life.
And I think the biggest thing too is, what advice would you have for somebody that's science-minded right now, but may be questioning or exploring spirit phenomena or sensing stuff? Or, what advice would you have? Because they're so trained to think a certain way.
Well, again, if they go explore anyone who became the genius in the sciences, they'll tell you that it was beyond the formulas. Einstein's a great example, but they've actually made movies now, Madame Curie and things like that they had this spiritual experience that really influenced their perceptions about things. The other thing too, and I think this is important, when I was asked to be the dean of students at the alternative healing school, I couldn't believe in their curriculum there was nothing about like the art of healing or the art of diagnosing. Again, the chiropractic and the acupuncture want to be accepted so bad by the Western that they've kind of westernized. And instead of having this intuitive approach, and I thought, why not bring that into a classroom so that it's not so foreign, that it's, again, people look at it as woo-hoo stuff, and it's not. It's so important. I've developed relationships with doctors that I don't care how good they are, but if they're not open-minded about, hey, what's going on emotionally with you, or what's going on, physically with you, versus just the physical aspects, then they're not going to be a good doctor, because they're not understanding me.
Right. I have been approached a lot by parapsychology majors, and my background's psychology, and so when I look at these new majors popping out, and they're also trying to be accepted by the Western world, I have to ask any scientist or anybody in the science world that is now, into spiritualism or metaphysical, what advice would you give to a parapsychology major? Like, what would you tell them?
The thing with psychology, and again, I think it's really important, I brought up a little bit, is to make sure that it's not just all quantitative information, that there has to be measures around, how a person's perception changes, how their awareness changes, how their behavior changes. There's these terms and there's these diagnoses in different disciplines of psychology, but it's kind of treating everyone the same. And I think that's problematic. With parapsychology, To me, I feel as though don't just focus on the mental state, look at the whole being. And see, I've always liked Carl Jung's work and Rudolf Steiner, because as psychologists, they realized there was something more than just the mind. Freud taught us a lot about that part, but they took a step back and said, wait, there's something bigger here. There's something influencing people that's beyond just the mind, but also questioning the mind. Because the area of parapsychology, I think, that could be very helpful when we go back to the term consciousness is where's consciousness? What is it? Where is it? And it's, there's quite a few scientists that are realizing that it's beyond the brain. There's something beyond that. And again, when you look at the energy field and the emotions and the thoughts and the beliefs and the behaviors that exist in the energy around things, that's consciousness. But think about every experience a person has, every person they've touched, every place they've touched, every experience they've had. And I'm not sure how a parapsychologist can do this, but I think they've got to take a different approach of assessing an individual, but also then trying to come up with a plan to help them through it.
Right.
And I don't know the terminology really well around psychology, so I don't know if I'm saying it right, but I just would say I always call it the hawk's view, like looking at things from above and the dynamics of the relationships and the experiences that individual had. The one thing I would hope they can master too is not to be so much about diagnosing and calling it something, because when we put everyone in a category and then we all say, well, you take this pill and you do this therapy, it doesn't always work that way for healing.
Oh, you're right. We're all unique. We shouldn't be categorized. Sometimes it's hard. It's limiting. Is there any other questions for Geof? Gloria?
So, Geof, what I'm hearing is your reaction to Angela's question is that there needs to be a revamping of the total curriculum of psychology on all levels, but especially at coming out of the higher institutes, that there has to be a more holistic inclusion. And do you have faith? What do you think, Geof? Is it,
Well, like they always say, follow the money. And
yeah.
When you look at, who gets the funding and stuff, that's the part that's disappointing. But I think as a teacher, the best gift you can give someone is to remove the obstacles from them understanding who they are, not telling them who they are, but letting them figure it out and giving them those opportunities to try to figure it out. And really in our curriculum, I think more self-assessment. 2 + 2 is 4, it great that that, but more importantly, to understand just life tools. And there's do you remember that series of books, Conversations with God?
Absolutely.
I think there were 3 books, and I think it was the 3rd book, he talked about the education system and about how we just have to and not segregate subjects like spirituality and religion and mathematics and physics, integrating them all together and making them understand that they're not independent from each other. I found that one of the greatest challenges is as studying molecular biology, I have calculus and these calculus classes. Then I have physics and I have biochemistry and I have cell biology. They're all independent from each other, but imagine how much better it would be at reasoning skills and just to integrate them all together. I think that would be more helpful. And that's where I think I have family members in education, and I have a sister that teaches math, but she has different pods, and she'll teach math and literature, like the literature teacher, like they have to figure out how they're going to melt those together. I think that's a great start. But to put parapsychology out by itself, or any aspect of spirituality, it's going to look like a foreigner because it's outside the realm. And if we could just bring it all together and talk about dreams, or talk about, I had this impression, or I have this premonition, to me, that would be much more helpful than not talking about them at all. If you look at our nation, we're having a mental health crisis because people don't want to talk about it. They want to wait till someone's in crisis and then try to come up with some plan that, oh, just because everyone else is bipolar, you're going to get 12 sessions and you're going to take these pills. And we have a lot to learn, and we have a lot of opportunity to heal, if we take off our over intellectualization of things and really put on the intuitive.
Excellent. Excellent. Wow. Gloria, anything else?
No, I could talk to him all day, but
Thank you so much. Geof, we are just so honored that you could come to our meeting, and we are so honored that you could speak about your experiences and sharing your story. Thank you so much.
Angela,
Yes.
you mind if I ask one quick question?
Oh,
I know
yes.
we're at time, but
No, that's okay.
It's okay. So, I love everything you're saying, and I am completely supportive of it, because I do believe that we need more of a integral, comprehensive education, starting at a very young age. I would say preschool and on, about not just your material understanding of health, wellness, and being on the earth plane, but also the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. What do you say, though, to someone who says, I'm an atheist? I don't believe in any of this afterlife, and I feel like you're imposing your beliefs system when you talk about this intuitive or this unknowing spiritual realm that is also affecting that you say is affecting my existence. How does this include them in the conversation?
Yeah, and again, a master teacher knows how to talk to their audience. So if you have a student that's coming from that perspective, I would get into the energy dynamics of living things and getting them to question, like, again, how is it you have the ability to understand what I'm saying to you and make, judgment or whatever you want to call it? Like, how is that possible if there's not something more than a meat suit? Like, how is that possible? And the one thing that I've come to understand about biology and biological systems, which are just fascinating, is that they are the most efficient and effective systems that exist. If your body doesn't use something, it gets rid of it. If you're not using your muscles atrophy away. If you're not using your neurons are going to atrophy away. So, from that perspective, and why is it that there's this desire to want to sustain life, to continue to live? Where does that come from? So if you can ask them questions like that, there's got to be something, like, otherwise, why would biology waste its time having all these human bodies around if there's nothing more to be done with them? And whatever they want to call it, but I hope I could get them to at least think that there's something bigger, whatever, if they want to call it God, if they want to call it energy, whatever they want to call it, but there's got to be something more. I mean, that's been demonstrated over and over and over again, that it just can't randomly happen. Like, how do you take an egg and a sperm and a human form? It's like, how is that possible? And when you look at just how amazing, and that's why I love teaching anatomy and physiology, because to understand just the magic and mysticism that happens, and I mean, you have billions of cells coordinating with hundreds of thousands of reactions at the same time. And how is that even possible? We couldn't even come close to making a computer system that way. You know, we're in awe with technology, but it's so limited when you look at just your own physical nature. There's got to be something bigger, whatever you want to call it. And that's, you know, I would hope that they'd explore that a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Anybody else? Geof, we would love to have you back next year. So think about 2023. Come in and talk again with us,
Excellent.
please.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, I want to share again about Geof. We want to do a plug for his website, geofjowett.com. And if you're looking for some new reading material and you have yet to read any of his books, Lasting Impressions, The Power of I Am, Hope for Parents Who Have Lost Children, and What's Cooking in Heaven, Grandma, are all available on his website, also Amazon.com, and I believe Barnes and Noble carries it too, right, Geof?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we want to thank Geof for speaking with us. We are so honored that he was able to make time on his Saturday holiday weekend. So thank you. Upcoming in August 6th at 2 p.m. Eastern is going to be Reverend Frank Kotowski, the Director of Department of Phenomenal Evidence for the National Spiritualist Association of Churches. This is open to the public. It is our way of trying to get information out on how to investigate phenomena and what is required to, to justify the protocols of it to investigate phenomena. So we hope everyone could come back and join us on August 6th at 2 p.m. It's the first Saturday in August. Also, as you know, we are a nonprofit. We are a Psychical Research Science Society that relies on donations. If you are interested in helping us grow our society, we do have a PayPal link, which is churchofpeacespiritual@gmail.com. Also, our website now has a donate button. Thank you, Ms. Charvon, for adding that the other day. So we actually have a direct link to our PayPal for anybody who would like to use credit cards or if they have their PayPal link. Okay, Siobhan, I can't hear you. Your mic's off.
And to add, if you want to make a specific donation to Psychical Research Society, please make a note of it in your donation or wherever you, or because if you don't make a note, it just goes to the general. Thank you.
And that is where we come to the end. Again, thank you, Geof, for coming to be with us today. We are so excited to have had you. And I wish everybody a happy Independence Day and enjoy your summer months in July. Thank you so much.
Namaste.
Awesome.